Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
And there's no rest for the weary. It is on occasion time for some batshit crazy B movies. So here, Jon Mark and I sum up the Warlock trilogy. That's right. How are you today?
I'm good.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, Warlocks, I'd always kind of heard the terminology is like, okay, it's a male witch, yada yada, all that. But when this popped up, it was very inconsistent. I could never find all three of these at the video store. On TV, more or less, one of the Stars channels would show part 2, and Sci-Fi Channel had an obsession with part 3, which I heard was always one of the worst movies of all time. So I always came back to this because whenever people brought up Julian Sands, there were all these people who are like, yeah, did he play that one title villain in these other crazy movies from the late 80s, early 90s? And so eventually I came back to it and rectified it because some of our favorite filmmakers, Anthony Hickox and Steve Miner, respectively, other franchises like Waxwork and Friday the 13th were involved with this. So I was like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's when I see this brought up, it's definitely one of those. It gets compared a lot to the Terminator, and as well as just later franchises like Wishmaster, and so that made sense to me. Just some kind of evil, almost unstoppable force going after a bunch of humans for whatever reason. It's
Yeah,
really
that makes sense.
Yeah, not really so much a stalker as he is just he wants these various rune stones that give him, unstoppable power, and the whole point of it is just an excuse for just easygoing frills and the main villain to just be hammy.
Exactly. That's the point.
There's really no other point, yeah. And another reason I kept somehow getting, prior to actually sitting down and seeing it, in recent years, the HBO Cinemax channels and even places like El Rey and other channels that like to show, uncut cult movies have been playing these a lot. It always struck me as wild as how David Twohy, the Riddick franchise, the Fugitive movie, and just countless other things, G.I. Jane,
Oh yeah.
the submarine thriller Below, so just the list goes on. Critters 2, Heat, A Perfect Getaway. So this was wild how this was one of his earliest writing credits before he just became the other go-to guy to make people hero on the run type movies. And I was always surprised that he never got involved with some other Joel Silver franchise.
That's true.
If not Jerry Bruckheimer. So this is kind of wild how. What was your introduction to this New World Pictures reject transferred to early Trimark, which was Lionsgate before it was a thing?
I think my introduction was I was going through Steve Miner's filmography, and this is one of the ones that I didn't see. This is just a few years ago.
And that's what was so wild. We were talking about him last episode before we got started, and Yeah, when I saw him at a convention, they listed all his movies. He's been involved with the Friday movies as well as Halloween H2O and Lake Placid, and I did not see that listed on there. Either I was blind or I didn't see it listed. And I was like, really? Okay, I thought he got some acclaim for this one, but he's had a steady TV career. He did one of my favorite horror fantasy shows called The Gates, which, despite crappy ads for it, I actually thought was a really good show despite lasting only one season. But yeah, he's been heavily involved in a lot of things, and he seems to enjoy anything he can get. Regardless of whether he's a mercenary for hire or if he's actually heavily creatively involved. So
yeah,
happy for him because that's a rarity. Julian Sands, long story short, he's one of those British actors. I'm surprised he's never been a bigger name. He's kind of a semi-big name. He's one of those people recognized from stuff like Leaving Las Vegas and The Killing Fields. He's definitely one of my favorite. Comic book people will know him as briefly playing Jor-El, the father of Superman on the CW show Smallville, but he's one of my favorite. Yeah, I know. a little wackier. He's done some other guest appearances on stuff like Ghost Whisperer and Person of Interest. But he's always going to be my favorite villain on the show 24. He absolutely nailed that Bierko Russian separatist villain. But yeah, he's done plenty of other ones. He's just always been just kind of an unusual face where you just instantly know it, and he just always surprises you, which says a lot, because if you didn't otherwise think it, you'd be like, okay, yeah, he's clearly going to be bad. But I mean,
obviously,
I've seen him in other movies. He's really good, yet briefly seen in Naked Lunch. He's the love interest in A Room with a View, which is a period piece movie that's not really my thing. I thought he was actually pretty good in that otherwise mediocre Jackie Chan film, The Medallion. But
just haven't seen, so there you go.
That's all good. It was pretty forgettable. Yeah, he has an extravagant movie and TV list. Was briefly even played the priest on the show Banshee, but he's just he's been here and there. You never know what to expect from him because he's just that welcoming of a quirky actor. And I mean, he's done some Star Wars video game voiceovers, but I was always surprised he wasn't actually in one of those movies. He's just seems like the kind of guy who would be a German, kind of Indiana Jones kind of villain. It seems like the closest he got was like Ocean's 13, but whatever. I digress.
But I also remember him if you remember, he was in Blood and Bone at one point.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the Michael J. White movie.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I always forget that he's on the Stargate SG-1 franchise very later seasons. And actually, ironically, playing a character not too far from this one, the Warlock. I am convinced after seeing that and re-seeing these that's totally why they casted him. They're like, who's that guy who was in those weird movies I saw on those movie channels? That guy. Get him. Yeah. He's been in some other stuff. He's in this Highlander-esque fantasy adventure film. What's it called? Hirokin, The Last Samurai. He's in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo briefly. He's been in some other heist movies, and he's kind of just the go-to guy. I've seen some people encounter him at some conventions, and he seems like he's fine. But he's definitely been one of my favorite multiple Law and Order guest actors. I'd see him. He's played multiple different roles. I think the thing that makes him stand out is just that you never really, aside from just not knowing what to expect from him and using the element of surprise to his advantage as a performer, he just really just always gives it 100, and sometimes even just becomes an unexpected anti-hero where he's not necessarily a villain, but he is some kind of opposing force or just some unusual foreign presence. He's just being representative or or like part of some love triangle where it's like, oh god, he's He's what's keeping this from becoming a pretentious premise, whatever it is. And like any of these British actors, he's done his share of bullshit where he's being the villain in an otherwise, low budget B movie. But he's done enough big budget scale stuff. I think you can let that slide. He's clearly not going to be an Anthony Hopkins, Alan Rickman type, but he's definitely still. I mean, the fact that he's even done a lot of video game works, including the Call of Duty games, I think you can safely say he's got his realm. Healthy mix of both A-list acclaim and just geekdom. Savvy roles. And the fact that he was at a convention doing autographs for these kinds of movies, I think that says it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your overall impression on this first movie? You've seen the first one. I've seen all three of these because they're just on cable TV nonstop. How does it flow as a whole milkshake of a movie?
Well, let's see. From what I remember being, pretty decent, not only with his pacing, but also Steve Miner's direction and some of the performances, especially Richard E. Grant.
Yeah.
Who I've always found to be pretty underrated, actually.
Yeah, I would put them actually both in the same category because, I mean, he's been getting a lot of acclaim lately for that one writer documentary he did with Melissa McCarthy and a bunch of other bit parts. Yeah. He did that other... Right. But I mean, he's done some other recent movies like Hitman's Bodyguard, and
yeah,
he's kind of known. He did like a play version of Doctor Who and got some acclaim from the Whovians, as they call it, the fan base of that. So yeah, he's kind of just been another guy who's just kind of been all over the place. He's in one of my favorite serial killer movies from the 90s. What's it called? That Richard E. Grant. Excuse me, gents. God.
I could say he's in one of my favorite horror films, which is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Gosford Park. He's in one of the recent Star Wars movies. He's briefly in Logan as like a key scientist role, which really surprised me.
I actually remember he was cast in that.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to be Mr. Sinister, and nope. I'm like, damn.
You're right. He's being a likable, I'm playing God. God, what's the one? 96. It's one serial killer movie. The Cold Light of Day. That's what it is. It's basically inspired by the same story that's been the inspiration for other movies like Fritz Lang's M, as well as The Pledge with Jack Nicholson. It's this one serial killer movie from like Sweden or something they keep adapting, and that was a really underrated early 90s movie he did. You can only find it on places like on VHS or on YouTube, but it's a good thriller where he basically just has to stay close to this family and kind of subtly use them to draw out the killer he's been stalking. He's also a brief part in Robert Altman's The Player, and other just lampoon type comedies like With Nell and I, How to Get Ahead in Advertising. He really embraces this. He doesn't really do it campy, but when it comes time for him to exchange a witty line, he times it rather well while still being serious in character instead of just wailing on the viewer. Laurie Singer, I think, is a decent heroine, but there's really not much to her character. And from what trivia I could find about this movie, apparently she was very difficult to work with, the director. She's better known for being the love interest in Footloose. So, well, that's a shame.
Well, I still haven't seen that, and I don't really care to. So there you go.
It's all good. It's actually a better movie than everyone thinks. It's just a musical. It's more just a fun kind of coming of age kind of movie.
Okay.
I'm not even all that much into dancing, but I mean, it's an easy crowd pleaser of a movie. Especially for Kevin Bacon fans. But yeah, I think this movie flows rather well. I don't ever feel like it really runs out of steam. I wouldn't call it formulaic, but it is kind of one of those movies. You really know what's going to happen, but you are still interested in seeing what happens. It's just kind of one of those. It's just easy going. It's lightweight. It provides the popcorn value. It's really not too violent of a movie, other than like the brief eyeball scene and just the gory, violence at the very end. But I really don't have any quibbles with this. I'm actually surprised at how many people actually like it, because these typically were the kind of movies people would just, roast. They just would not be taken aback by them too happily. I still need to get the Vestron series, the Lionsgate Blu-ray that came out, because I know there's some extra features and it just looks like fun. It's just way too expensive for my taste, so I'm waiting for it to go down, since I frequent eBay for these kind of movie collectibles.
I might have to get that as well when it's cheaper.
Right, 26 still a little too much. So
oh no!
Yeah, wait for it to go down to at least 10, maybe 13. I don't know.
No price.
It was something. So this was followed by a reboot movie, and it's kind of weird because it kind of follows it, yet while kind of going its own route. As a fan of Hickox, I know he gets a bad bashing because some people just don't like what he did with Hellraiser and whatnot. I actually don't mind him just as a person. I think he, you know him from doing stuff like Full Eclipse and other direct-to-video action movies like Submerged. What's the other one he did with Eddie Griffin and
Blast?
Vinnie Jones' Blast. I actually kind of like that because it's by the writer of Die Hard. A lot of people just seem to just really just well on him. I don't know. I think he's done pretty good B action movies and has a good idea. I mean, he did the Larry Cohen kidnapping thriller Invasion of Privacy. He's done some brief TV work. He's done some of my favorite Dolph Lundgren movies like Stormcatcher, and some Armin Ashanti films for HBO like Federal Protection and Consequence, Last Run. But even the wacky Bruce Campbell comedy Sundown, The Vampire in Retreat. So, I mean, all I can say is, if you don't really know what to expect, I think he's pretty solid at just biting what he can handle on any kind of budget and embracing the beast spectacle.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We might talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yeah, yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair to say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen, and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
could you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah.
Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one last plot holes or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy
at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography, which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VD Clinic Pod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VD Clinic Pod, or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
I actually prefer Warlock too. I know Radiodrome and other people don't care for this. This one is kind of just wild because it's kind of a neo-western, if that makes sense. And the first one was kind of about the druids and just the witchcrafts, and this one basically they imply just flat out that the Warlock is Satan's son, capable of getting all these runestones and all this other stuff, but they just flat out they don't really explain why the Warlock is back, but they just cut to the chase. It's like he's here to wreak more havoc.
Okay.
And they just flat out they make up for it by just offering some fun kills and another fun cast. The guy playing the dad here is the same guy who's like the police captain in those Lethal Weapon movies.
Okay.
Zach Galligan has a brief role. Joanna Pacula. So even Bruce Glover. So it's just a straightforward movie. I mean, let the Armageddon begin. The tagline. That's just all you need to know.
I love that.
Yeah, there you go. The CGI has not dated well, but because the fight is at least kind of creative, you kind of just can forgive it. Ironic how Anthony Hickox had earlier worked with Bruce Payne on the Full Eclipse, because Bruce Payne is who later plays the Warlock. All I can say is it just flat out gets on with the mayhem. It's a lot of fun. The way the townspeople kind of react to this whole thing is kind of interesting. The movie just embraces mayhem. But yeah, I mean, this is not for the squeamish, but it's not excessive, like to the point where it's kind of like a torture porn kind of movie. So it's just straightforward mayhem. I find it a acceptable sequel to the first one.
I have to check it out.
Now, part 3, that's kind of the killjoy. I mean, really not much shit happens for this movie for quite some time. But when it finally gets to the end, it's kind of a lot of fun just seeing Bruce Payne just be over the top. Like he always is. He's been in everything. Highlander, Endgame, Passenger 57, so what else can I say? He's just a wacky dude. It's interesting seeing what's her name from Ashley Lawrence from Hellraiser herself.
Oh, nice.
So yes, you can now say that she's fought both Pinhead and a Warlock. I would always get her mixed up with Danielle Harris from Halloween, but it's a different discussion for another day.
Yeah.
This one kind of gets shit on also because the director was kind of a UK TV commercial director. Did casual made-for-TV direct-to-video movies. The writers were people who worked for Lionsgate or other bullshit. They were just the money men who had no business in the scripting world. I think the biggest issue is it just feels too much like hitting on Radiodrome's issue. Yeah, it is trying to capitalize on the success of stuff like Scream, because that's just what every movie was doing at around this time. I wasn't bored. I just thought it was just kind of just a little schlocky, and then just eventually, like, when the shit hit the fan, then it started getting interesting again. I definitely wouldn't call it as bad as, say, the, Wishmaster 3 or 4, or just some of the more infamous Friday the 13th movies. Just, it's not that bad, but it is pretty dorky. It blurs the line between acceptable, stylish movie and Mystery Science Theater fodder. So, Go at your own pace. That's all I could say. Otherwise, it's kind of weird how this franchise has kind of gone on in pop culture. I mean, when people are looking for, researching actual, urban legends, and they look up a warlock, it's impossible to look it up on Google Images without coming across a cover of one of these movies.
That's true.
Yeah. I think what made at least the first two movies work for me is, part one, even though there was some time travel at the beginning, he gets 300 years into the present day, which at that time was, late 80s. It didn't make the time travel be part of the whole deal. It's like, I'm fine with that, because then it just becomes less argumentative.
Yeah.
And part two, it was kind of cool how it juggled all these elements. It had some suspense elements. It had some kind of... It still felt rather 80s, even though it came out in 93. And apparently there was a video game of this, and...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Although it was kind of bizarre, because they make the villain be kind of the hero who you play as in the game. He's correcting all the stones and fighting people, and it's like,
okay.
Thank God there wasn't a big ethics committee review on video games at that time. There was a 2009 comic book that I've been trying to read. Unfortunately, you can find just about any comic book on the internet if you look hard enough, and there's sites dedicated to it that get powered by ads that allow you to look it up. It was published in 2009, kind of its own standalone story. They weren't allowed to use Julian Sands' likeness for whatever reason, probably not in the budget. And so they just made it be some other kind of blonde, serious face, stone cold dude. Yeah, so I kind of like how movie 1 and 2 both juggle a lot of elements, different genres. It's wild how there's just so many dark comedic elements in movie 1 that are either said by the villain or just during the harpoon fight where everyone's just struggling to even stay on their feet as they're, getting dragged by this dude. Movie 2, again, it's pretty much a high noon type Western when you take away all the horror fantasy elements, but again, this is where he becomes more like Jason, where you're just kind of looking forward to the kills and just all the mayhem. And I can totally understand why he ended up, Anthony Hickox ended up being kind of just the go-to horror guy for a brief period. I mean, he does, Hell on Earth after this for Hellraiser franchise. But I think this is the better movie overall. I mean, I think it's just, even though it's not too comedic, I just like how the character is just menacing. Even though movie 1 is just a little more lighthearted and laid back.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
there's some good chemistry between the two protagonists. Yeah, I got nothing else to really input. I would rate. How would you rank the movie 1? Probably a 3.5, maybe a 4.
Probably 3.5.
Yeah.
3.5 is about right.
That's basically where these are. That's where I would rank movie 1 and 2. Movie 3, it's a little complicated. It's most people are going to rank it a 1. I think realistically it's more of a 2 because it's mileage is gonna vary. Since I watch all of these at 2 in the morning often, because this is when I have time to watch just outrageous movies like these that won't offend anyone else in my presence. It's definitely made for that kind of thing. Just watch it at 2 in the morning and just maybe bring some drinks and sense of humor with you. So free for just the outrageous schlock factor and Bruce Payne's over-the-top performance. But yeah, just pretty much we're in the same boat as we were with the Mummy. Just stick with the first 2 movies. They kind of they're gonna appeal to the same kind of crowd who likes stuff like Evil Dead and even the Terminator movies. We all had our share of just watching other knockoffs of these, and I don't really think it's necessarily a knockoff. It's just more the same kind of. It uses just some of the same elements. I don't think it's fair to just call it just a straight up ripoff, like Universal Soldier, you know. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it that.
It's just using some of the similar copy and paste, but that's about it. I mean, not even the time travel's the same. It's just unstoppable force going after someone who has something the other villain wants. So, I think due to the simplicity, that's just why these are easygoing, gory action horror fare. That action scenes won't necessarily stand out, and the horror isn't the scary kind, but it should still entertain just the B-movie fandom in us. That's all I can really add to that. Yeah, John, if you want to plug anything, go ahead. Other than that, I think we're a wrap here.
Well, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's ActionFan555.
Yep. Frequent mini reviews, whether they're posted on Action Lead or just, hey, you know, recently rewatched this, it holds up, or it's got some issues.
Yeah.
You're way more active. I need to start getting active again. I'm just so bogged down with the podcast and work. Other than that, thanks for being on here.
You're welcome.
Anytime.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.